good possibly evening to everybody. Welcome to the Ayn Rand Center UK channel. My name is Jacqueline Schumann. I will be your lovely hostess with the mostest. And I am here with my good friend, Paul Guay. And say hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
All right, awesome. Today, we are going to be talking about a topic that's sort of near and dear to my heart. It revolves around the MMA world, mixed martial arts. And this is in regards to a heavyweight fighter named Cain Velasquez. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with MMA, become familiar with it. It's one of the coolest sports ever. But Cain Velasquez is made his rise in a gym called AKA, American Kickboxing Academy, which is a gym I trained out of. And he has, I believe his record is like 14-3. Paul, if you know different, maybe you can correct me.
That sounds roughly correct.
He has, so Cain Velasquez is an amazing fighter, an amazing wrestler. His nickname is Cardio Cain. And the rule in the gym was nobody can rest until Cain gets tired. And he never got tired. And this is kind of unprecedented for a heavyweight, because heavyweights are generally known for gassing pretty quickly because they just have so much, muscle and weight that they're moving around with. But Cain could just go. He's just one of those like freaks of nature that could just go forever. And he was also a really great guy with very little. I know that we as objectivists embrace the word ego, but let's just say he wasn't one of these arrogant, falsely confident people. He was a very quietly confident guy, very nice. And also I want to say anything that I talk about here today is stuff that's all publicly available for that's like in the records, and you can search for it in court systems as well. But I'm not going to give away any inside baseball. I really don't know that much inside baseball anyhow on Cain. I truly respect him as a fellow athlete. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today, however, is in regards to a situation that befell him. And at the time, it wasn't known who the victim was. So this is about a year ago. This would be around February 2022. Cain learned that at the time it was publicized that it was a member of it was a relative. It was a close relative who was a child who got molested repeatedly, sexually abused and assaulted repeatedly by a daycare worker. It later came out that that relative was his own 4-year-old son. And it also came out later that it was hundreds of times that it happened. So as I understand, what Cain and his family did was they went to the police. The police, and it was it was the son of the woman that ran the daycare center, basically. His name is Harry Goularte, is the suspect's name, the alleged suspect. So the police actually interviewed Harry Goularte and had enough probable cause to arrest him and incarcerate him. But then the judge at his bail hearing basically let him out, as we understand, with no bail, little to no bail, let him out, let him go free. And as far as I know, I don't believe that there were any restrictions put on him. He was supposed to pick up an ankle bracelet. Somehow, and this is where the facts are a little vague, somehow Cain learned of it, whether it was on purpose or on accident. I'm not sure if that is part of what the defense is going to be talking about at his trial. But somehow he learned of it and became livid that he was out, that this person who assaulted his son was out. And as the story goes, he got into his Ford 250 truck, brought a gun with him, followed the suspect, followed Harry Goularte, who was driving in a car with his stepfather and mother, and shot the car up, basically, injuring the stepfather, not injuring the intended victim, and then rammed the truck in to them, and then afterwards, effectively confessed to the police, didn't fight, told them everything that happened, and so then he went to jail for attempted murder on 10 different counts. 10 different counts of, it was attempted murder, shooting a vehicle or aircraft. It was like, there's a particular term for it. I think we're going to talk about this topic in more detail from a legal perspective, maybe with James Valiant, which would be cool. But 10 different counts, possession of a firearm, blah, blah, blah. It was his, legal firearm registered to him, and was in jail for 8 months, was denied bail twice.
3 different times?
Yes, 3 different times denied bail. Now, this is interesting because the judge that denied him bail is the same judge that let the alleged sexual assaulter, Harry Goularte, out. So we were, here in San Jose, we're hearing about all this, like, what, how could this be the same judge? Isn't that some kind of weird conflict? And but this judge, really believed that Cain was a danger to society. As soon as they got a new judge, that new judge immediately let Cain out. And with restrictions, I think he has an ankle bracelet, he has to get special permission to go places. I know he did a pro wrestling match in Arizona shortly after he was released. But so that's kind of the story. Have I missed any important facts, Paul?
Did you mention that he was the world champion?
I did not mention that. And he is the 2-time world champion, I think, right?
I'm not sure offhand. Should I jump in for a moment?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so Jax knows Cain personally, at least to some extent, and I do not know him except as a fan. So just to give a bit of my background, I love mixed martial arts. For me, it's the most fascinating sport in the world because it combines so many other sports, because it's like professional wrestling, except that the outcomes are not predetermined, because they're incredibly dedicated athletes who do this, who put their health and their lives at risk. I find it extremely exciting to see the different ways in which people can overcome adversity and defeat the opposition. So when Cain came on the scene, he was a heavyweight unlike any that we had seen before. Jax referred to his cardio that he was known for, and he could go 5 rounds, 5-minute rounds. So that's 25 minutes, pretty much all out, which no other heavyweight that I've ever seen could do. And he was also very skilled. A lot of heavyweights depend on one-punch power or on the blubber around their midsections to win, and he wasn't that. He was a legitimate athlete. He was a real wrestler. He could punch, and he was destroying his opposition. So he was somebody that I'm predisposed to be entirely on the side of. I should just say, Jax has hit the word alleged several times, so I just want to say, for me, if I forget to say alleged, everything that I'm saying, including my name, should be preceded by the word alleged, because God knows I wasn't there during any of these things that happened. So to further set things up, we haven't actually gotten into the right or wrong of it, but yeah, I think he was a world champion. He was extraordinary at what he did. He was sort of a gentle giant, sort of a person, from what I understand. He was such a good training partner that the guy he chiefly trained with, Daniel Cormier, became not only the light heavyweight champion of the world, but at one point the heavyweight champion of the world. So he was obviously a fantastic teammate. He was somebody that I understand his teammates looked up to. Cormier in particular said he would never wrestle Cain, either because he thought he couldn't beat him or because of respect for him, or both. And that's an unusual sort of a thing, I think, to turn away a potential shot at the world title when his friend held it, and it could have been a huge fight. But that's the respect that Daniel Cormier had for him. So that's the man who's accused of doing what Jax has described.
And also, in good company, DC is a great guy. I actually have rolled jujitsu with him before, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show. Like, these guys are so great to train with because they have nothing to prove. They're, when you roll with a white belt, especially as a girl, and you're rolling with a white belt who's a guy, they just want to smush you and smash you. And I had so many injuries just from dumb white belts. But when I rolled with DC, they're there to teach you. They give you just enough resistance, and they're excellent training partners. And I know one of my friends right now is training with Cain for a fight that he's got. And just that. And I've heard several podcasts of Cain since he's gotten released. And he's focused very much on his family right now and reconnecting with them. But let's talk a little bit about this. And we've got some great super chats, so we'll get to those as well. But what do you think I remember getting a text from my stand-up coach, who was also Cain's stand-up coach. And the text was, Cain shot someone. and I'm like, what? And then I find out, the next day what happened. And it's like, as soon as you hear the story, you're like, yeah, I probably would have done the same damn thing. What's the right and the wrong of this, Paul? When it's your own kid, right? It's your own. Yeah. And here's the other thing too. Imagine, okay, nobody messes with Cain. Nobody, right? That man could walk down, walk down the street in East Oakland, with his kids, and nobody would touch him, right? Yeah. So imagine as, a man who is so confident and in his skills in protecting his family, and he couldn't protect his son from this horrible, horrific thing that happened.
Okay, so one other thing I just want to mention in terms of background. People who don't know MMA might think of people who fight for a living as being kind of wild street fighters who are just one step away from prison at all times, and this is their only alternative. And that's definitely true for a very small minority of professional MMA fighters. They go around looking for fights. I don't want to mention Jorge Masvidal at this point, or what he might allegedly have done to Colby Covington. But there are other people who are athletes and who are doing this to prove something to themselves and to other people. And I would say that Cain definitely falls into that category. He's not somebody who's going around the neighborhood trying to find people to punch out. Okay, so my reaction was very different from Jax's. Partially, I'm guessing, because I don't have a personal connection to the gym or to Cain. For me, my first reaction was one of disbelief, because it sounded like a Keystone Cops situation. You have the former heavyweight champion of the world grabbing a gun, getting into a car chase, not with his intended victim, but with his intended victim and two other people in the car, shooting wildly, allegedly, and allegedly hitting the stepfather, who I believe was driving.
He did hit the stepfather for sure.
I don't know how you could screw things up worse if you planned it, and clearly he didn't plan it enough. By the way, by enough, I don't mean that I'm supporting what he did. So the first thing was, you're kidding, right? This didn't seriously happen. So then I was thinking about it subsequently, and a ton of people like Jax have kind of risen in support of Cain. There were people wearing free Cain T-shirts, I think, outside the prison or outside the courtroom or whatever. I have a different feeling. First of all, I want to speak briefly in support of vigilante justice under the right circumstances. I think if you see somebody in the commission of a crime that is serious enough, like torture or murder or rape or something like that, I think you're incredibly justified to stop that from happening by any means necessary. If you see somebody completing an act and running away, fleeing, and you have reason to believe, or it just makes common sense, that that person is going to evade capture, then I would suggest that, in my opinion, it would be right to use whatever means are necessary to stop the person from fleeing. If circumstances are such that there is no chance that the perpetrator will come to justice, then I would definitely consider the possibility of an eye for an eye, sort of whatever, the word that starts with R and involves retribution. I would consider that type of justice. Or if you thought that the person was going to escape and do it again to somebody else, I would definitely be considering it if there's no other way to stop them. In my opinion, what Cain is alleged to have done doesn't fall into any of those categories. The person he was shooting at was not in the act of committing a crime. He wasn't fleeing a crime. He was driving with his mom and his stepfather. In terms of there being no chance of bringing him to justice, he'd already been arrested and was going to be looking at trial. In terms of continuing to do it, so Jax, you said that as far as you know, There are no restrictions put on the freedom of the alleged perpetrator of the molestations. If that's true, I find that horrifying. The idea that he isn't enjoined from being, from being within 50 yards of anybody under the age of 10, I find horrifying, if that is correct. And the idea that he would be allowed to return to the school where these acts allegedly took place, if that is the case, I find that horrifying. And for me, it opens a little bit of possibility of justifying, to some extent, what Cain did. But other than that, I would prefer that people not hunt down people and kill them or try to kill them. But I really especially prefer that they don't do that in certain circumstances. One is, I've heard that one of his attorneys says there may be a heat of passion defense. And again, I don't know the circumstances of the case well enough to say anything with, that anybody should take seriously. However, my understanding was that it was a day or two or something like that after Cain learned that the alleged perp had been let out on bail that he went after him. So yeah, you can have your passion go for 24 or 48 hours, but it's less compelling to me than in the heat of the moment, because you have more time to think and more time to kind of back down from that.
That's if the circumstances in which he learned about it were not suddenly in your face, and that's what
Right.
we don't know about yet. So what the thing, I want to actually agree with Paul on this in terms of I don't support getting in your car and hunting people down and shooting them, because first of all, it's really difficult to get a shot off and hit your target standing still. To do it in a car, I mean, that's like John Wick stuff, I mean, it was, and this is kind of the interesting thing about this, is that it was very non-Cain. Like, it was like that when we heard this, we were like, he did what? Why didn't he just go beat him the F up, but, and that's kind of, now, if it was somebody like Matt Major, who was, I don't know if you ever watched Tap Out, way back when, but Matt Major was also at AKA, and as far as I know now, he's sort of living on the streets in San Jose, but he actually developed schizophrenia and turned into a straight up criminal. It's like somebody like that, we're like, oh yeah, that's definitely, I can believe that. Right. But somebody like Cain was like, wait, he did what? And that sort of leads me to be kind of more on the side of in the heat of the passion moment. Like, and they're also talking about, potentially he's got a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, from all of the, he's had a couple knockouts, right? Like he's been knocked out a couple times himself. But I mean, just from all the beating that goes on in, in training, just in training camp, who knows how many concussions he's had. That could also be a factor, which they will get into, I'm sure, at the defense. But that's why, to me, it was like he just did this crazy, off book thing that nobody in the world would imagine Cain to do. And that, to me, kind of makes more sense, that if something just he had a break, like a psychotic break, let's say that he wasn't aware that this guy was out, and then all of a sudden he saw him and he was like, I thought this guy was supposed to be in jail. Oh my God, I must stop him.
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense to me in terms of potentially mitigating the sentencing, as opposed to finding guilty or not guilty. I don't know enough about brain injuries, but I do know that there's a class that you can only determine after death in an autopsy what the extent of the injuries have been. I know that Chris Benoit, when he murdered his family, he was a professional wrestler. He was found out to have traumatic brain injuries. I forget what the term is. So I don't know to what extent, if that means that you're 100% not morally responsible, 1% morally responsible, 99%, I don't know. I'm not qualified to talk about it. But the notion of shooting at people in a moving car, as you said, first of all, from a practical point of view, who does that? There's a good reason nobody does that. And second, I don't know the degree of culpability, if any, of the stepfather and the mother, who I believe the mother, as you mentioned, ran the daycare center. So if the allegation
they've filed a civil suit. So on behalf of Cain's son, it was Michelle, Cain's wife, who filed it while Cain was in jail, but they filed a civil suit against all three of them, against the mother, the stepfather, and the son, claiming that they were completely complicit in allowing the son to do this. And they're also as I understand, there are also other potential victims from at the same daycare center that this has happened to, because it wasn't, and again, it wasn't just once or twice, it was hundreds of times. And, you know, police officers are they have to bring in specially trained police officers to interview the children, right, to make sure that the children are getting giving the proper information and not being led. So to me, you know, it was enough that they actually arrested the man after they interviewed him. He still claims that he's innocent, but they arrested him. It was enough for them to actually, you know, believe. And his trial, it'll be interesting. His trial is coming up. It's been continued multiple times because the mother has been evading being served.
Okay.
So that, you know, I mean, I think you know, things point toward the guilt. So I can understand if he saw all three of them in the car, like, these are the people, you know, these are the people that did this to my son. But
let me just jump in there. I
yeah.
was sort of hoping that would be said at some point during all of the months leading up to our conversation. When you just said that a civil suit had been filed, this is the first time I've heard of it. And if I were Cain, and if I'm the type of person who has done these things and has turned myself into the police, one of the first things out of my mouth, unless a lawyer stopped me from saying it, would be all three of them were involved. Because otherwise it's like,
he did say, I think he did.
Okay.
He did say it. But that didn't, I'm one of these people that goes and I can find court documents because they're publicly available. And I read the whole case. I read the whole like civil suit, but he does have kind of a really big defense attorney. And I imagine that might well be part of the strategy as well. Because the defense attorney is not, what the prosecution has right now is that Cain intentionally, with the intent to commit murder, followed the guy, like was stalking him and followed him. The defense attorney is like, well, something different is going to come out at trial. I'm not going to say what it is because I'm not going to give the prosecution any more than they need. So it's going to be a trial that I'm very interested in watching. However, I agree with you that, you know, like who else could have gotten injured in that, right? It was reckless at best.
At best, yeah, because if you're shooting the driver of a car, whether you intend to or not, you're shooting at the car, at people in the car. The driver can lose control, can hit other people. The bullets could go elsewhere and hurt other people. One of my problems with terrorism is that people take grievances which may or may not be just against person or group X, and they don't confine their revenge to person or group X. They'll just kill anybody or torture anybody that gets in their way. There's a blind disregard for the difference between the guilty and the innocent because they're so self-righteous that they think their anger entitles them to bring innocent people into the fray. This isn't exactly that, but this is sort of close to it to me because of the reckless endangerment. I think it's inexcusable that you would shoot into a moving car on a freeway or wherever they were, especially if there were other cars or civilians around. I see no possible argument where that makes sense, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why, you know, the most benevolent part of me hopes that it was some kind of complete and total psychotic break that, because, you know, what if another child got killed, right? What if he shoots into the car and a stray bullet, it kills somebody else, the completely innocent bystander. So, all right, we've got some super chats. So let me get to those.
Cool.
And we didn't think we were going to make it past 20 minutes. All right, Mary Aline for $3 with a fist bump, thank you. And Robert Nasir for $5. Hi, Robert. A subject near and dear to my heart, and in regard to which I've been accused of irrationality, emotionalism, and subjectivism. That's interesting. Robert, do tell more about that. Jonathan Honig for $4.99 with a clapping hippo. Thank you, Jonathan. And Nick Bruno, $10. Thank you. And yes, thank you. Mary Aline again for $5. Cain tried to let the legal system work, and the legal system failed him. That judge was outrageously evil. Cain was still wrong, but I sympathize. Now that's interesting. What do you think about that, Paul?
I don't know if the legal system failed yet. It had begun. I'm not saying whether I support or don't support letting out the alleged molester on bail, but that's not the end of the legal system. That's the beginning of the process. I find it, I would, if I were in Cain's position, of course I would be enraged. Of course I would want the perpetrator to suffer grievous bodily harm, but that's not what his reactions were limited to.
That's exactly true. And to the sorry, hold on just one second. To Mary Elaine's point earlier, I think that the judge who let the alleged suspect, I guess, out on bail was equally wrong as leaving Cain in jail, because I think that there was kind of a conflict of interest. However, in defense, this alleged suspect, as far as I could tell, has not had any prior convictions. And I think it's different if you've had a prior conviction, like he was not on any sex offender list before. And so the legal system has to, and this is what is great about our legal system, that this is why I love living here and I wouldn't want to live in any other country where the legal system is different, is you are innocent until proven guilty. So while there was enough evidence for the police to arrest Harry Goulart, the man that assaulted Cain's son, as far as the legal system is concerned, you come in with a presumption of innocence. You are legally innocent until a court of law can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that's 99%, that you're guilty. Whereas with Cain, he'd already admitted to, the evidence was overwhelming that Cain had already, followed this person, shot them. That much was true. So I agree with you, Paul. The legal system was just beginning, and that, one bad call from the judge does not, mean that the justice system totally failed him.
Right.
I can understand from a parent's perspective feeling that way for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, me too. Absolutely. Absolutely. At the same time, don't shoot the other two people. Don't endanger the other two people and the other people on the road and bystanders.
Yeah. Mary Elaine, again, for $2 says the mother had to know. And Catherine Cassio for just $1.99 contributing. Thank you. I do think that the mother had to know. It's, there's a, if it's true that he did this, and if it's true that he did this repeatedly to other children, I can only, and of course I can't get inside the mind of another person, but I do, feel like as a mother, your children. It would be difficult for me to understand how he could be doing this to multiple children, hundreds and hundreds, up to thousands of times, maybe, if it's, depending on how many children, without anyone knowing about it, without any of the workers knowing about it, without the mother knowing about it, without the stepfather knowing about it. And even still, you're running she's running a daycare facility, right? You have a higher responsibility to search for things like that, to background check all the people that you're working with, to weed that stuff out. And you also have a responsibility, you're a mandatory reporter when you are in that situation. If you see anything that is at all inappropriate, you have to report it by law. So it'll be, and the fact that she has not been, they actually had to issue what's it called, public notice, where you put it out in the paper that a person is being sued. And the only time that they actually direct a newspaper to create an article that you're being sued is when they can't serve you. Like, you keep evading service over and over. They have to personally serve you to show up to court. And, the rule here is, well, if I didn't get served, I didn't know about it. And so, right. But then they have to resort to the alternative, which is you're being sued. If you don't show up to court, we can rule against you in your absence. And that was the only time that she showed up.
It's very hard for me to understand how a justice system can't serve a person with known addresses. It seems, that seems ludicrous to me, but yeah.
Oh, it happens all the time because you have to, when you serve somebody, you have to ask their name and hand them the papers, and then you have to
Yeah.
report that you did it. And if you never answer the door, they can't, you can't just leave it at the doorstep.
No, you could follow people when they leave, however.
They do that. Yeah,
Okay.
they definitely do that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's interesting. So do you think that there's a difference? The title of this topic is moral versus legal guilt. Do you think in this case there is a moral guilt that Cain needs to bear that is less than a legal guilt, or do you think that he's morally as guilty as the legal system would so far has so far determined?
I'd have to see what he would wind up being found guilty of to compare them. But in terms of moral guilt, to me, unquestionably, he's got moral guilt because of, again, assuming arguendo that the guy he was trying to hit actually did molest his kid and molested other kids. My moral problem with what he did is almost zero in that case if nobody else is involved. Almost zero. I don't think shooting him is probably the appropriate thing, but I could see beating the crap out of him as only Cain could do it 5 times in a row on Sundays. But I don't think you get to endanger other innocent people if your cause is the best in the history of the world. I don't think you get to do that. I think it's different in wartime or in a hostage-taking situation where you cannot get at the guilty without endangering the innocent. And the argument there would be it's the guilty who have endangered the innocent. But I just don't think you shoot it into a moving car where one person has been accused of the crime and the other two have not. And they may or may not be guilty of knowing or not knowing. But I think that's completely inappropriate. I don't think he should spend the rest of his life in jail for that. But to me, that's a moral wrong. And his outrage, his justifiable outrage at what he thinks happened and at what may have happened, I completely get and completely sympathize with, and I'd probably be as pissed off as he was. But I hope to God I wouldn't shoot into a car of moving people. Yeah.
Now, and so I think that the moral guilt, I agree with you on the moral guilt. As long as they proved that he was in his right mind. If they prove otherwise, if they prove that something just snapped and he lost connection to reality, which I have a friend actually who recently got a traumatic brain injury. And the way that she describes how you recover from this is there's 2 different sides of you. There's one side that is kind of like that, like stays over, is like in a corner and doesn't want to come out and like doesn't understand what's going on. And then there's another side that comes out if it's triggered that is insanely aggressive, and it's almost like you have no control over what you're doing. So it will be interesting to, if I'm going to reserve my moral judgment for whether they prove that there was something going on with his brain that caused a complete break with reality. That's the only way that I could kind of go, okay, he was not in his right mind at all. And he didn't even, he was not necessarily aware of what he did. But that to me would be the only, excuse, really.
And that potentially opens the door to how do we know he's going to be safe in the future? If he's if the wrong trigger sets him off into an arguably murderous rage in which he is willing to endanger the lives of other people who are innocent. I don't mean necessarily the other people in the car, but civilians or whatever. How do we know that that's not going to happen again? I agree with you that I think moral guilt is diminished or eliminated if you have a significant enough brain injury that you can't control yourself. And again, clearly I'm no expert about this. There are many, many, many people with traumatic brain injury who don't shoot into moving cars. So is the argument then that given this circumstance, everybody with this traumatic brain injury would do it? Or does he have any culpability whatsoever, even with traumatic brain injury? Again, I don't know. These are above my pay grade.
And mine as well. I'm not a doctor, nor am I a legal expert in this matter. I think it's interesting. I'm just sort of an amateur connoisseur of mental disorder. And I'm listening to, or I just finished listening to a really cool book on mental disorder. And there's one example that this guy provides. He's a psychiatrist and also researcher in optogenetics, which is really interesting, fascinating field. But he provides this one example of a man who was completely normal, had just retired from working for an insurance company, and then he was like 65 years old, something like that, was looking forward to retirement with his wife, and then 9/11 hits, and he's in New York, and he had a complete and total psychotic break in the matter of, he started obsessing over the victims of 9/11 and what they must have gone through, and just like in a matter of 24 hours completely shifted his mental state.
Yeah.
So I mean, the brain is a fascinating thing on its own. It will be really interesting to see how this shakes out for Cain, what the defense is able to present, what the prosecution presents. I agree with you, Paul. If it does, if he did have a break, then what's to say that he may not be dangerous in the future, unless he's getting sort of intense therapy and regular counseling. And you can heal from TBI. You have to get like special kind of trauma counseling. But I still like, at the end of the day, my heart goes out. My heart goes out to Cain and his family, especially his son. For what that boy went through. It's luckily, I mean, you can sort of, I guess, the younger you are, if you get early intervention, kids are resilient. And I know that there's a lot of love in his family. It'll be interesting to see how this shakes out.
Yeah, this is not victim blaming. This is just an observation. I wish to God the son had said something earlier, because if we're hearing 100 times or hundreds of times, and I wish kids felt empowered to just speak out the first time.
Well, you don't. So it purportedly happened from, I think it was in a brief amount of time. It was, I think, from like November of 2021 to January 2020, wow. Which is, I mean, brief amount, that's like agony. But as I understand the way that it started, and I apologize for, I don't want to be graphic, but I mean, these are all details that are available in news articles. But this guy's MO was he would take the kids to the bathroom and help them pull their pants down. Okay. And then touch them, and then expose himself. And then so it's, first of all, as a parent to a 4-year-old child, like, I mean, I don't think I ever told my daughter, well, I wouldn't think to, okay, if, somebody does this to you and does that, you just don't think you think that they're safe, and you go to these daycare places and, they're vetted and they have, good recommendations, and you just, it's so hard to imagine. I know that these people exist, but it's still just hard to imagine a person doing that. And I think that, how I think they knew is that his behavior completely changed, because the other thing too is what these molesters do, these pedophiles, is they groom you, right? They make you trust them, then they alienate you from other people. And then the things that they do to you, they say, don't tell anybody about it. Right. So, I mean, it's when you say, like, I wish that he had said something sooner. I don't know if like a child at that age is capable, when an adult is manipulating them so expertly.
Point taken.
But yeah, interesting. It'll be interesting. So this has been great. We've had a lot of really, I'm reading the chat as well. I'm kind of trying to follow up. Oh, Christopher Smith asked, was he on drugs like speed, for example? I have no idea. I have my gut says no, just from knowing the kind of like health nut that Cain is. But I would imagine that would have been in a police report or something. They would have tested him for that. That might have come out in the news. But we'll find out at the trial. I'm going to watch the trial. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So Paul, any closing thoughts on this?
It's sad. It's just, I mean, Cain took an intolerable situation and arguably made things worse for his family by the actions that he did, unfortunately. You know, he's obviously suffering now because of how he chose to react, and I assume his wife and his son are suffering as well, to one extent or another. I would love it if what happened in the daycare center is made public and is correct, and that everybody who was involved and who knew or should have known gets the appropriate punishment. I think Cain needs some kind of sentence that implies that we don't condone. Again, my problem isn't with vigilante justice in the absolute. It's with this type of vigilante justice, which for me is not excusable. And I think he needs to have the equivalent of a heavy slap on the wrist or more for that.
Yeah, I can agree with that, because it was recklessness. It was extreme recklessness that put other people's lives in danger. But yeah, I'm with you too. I wonder, like I would have just gone and beat this guy's. then it's battery, right?
Of all the people on earth who have the ability to do that to somebody,
I know.
I mean, he could submit him 5 different ways. He could knock him out 7 different ways. It's like, Cain, exactly. You don't need a gun.
I know. I know. Yeah, he brought a gun to what should have been a fist fight.
A fist fight, exactly. That's the problem. I can't imagine anybody on earth putting that guy behind bars for beating the crap out of this alleged molester, but it's a little different with a gun, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do hope that if the molester is found, if the alleged molester is found to be guilty, I feel confident he will go into a special place in jail, and I hope that they get to him there. Because people in jail, one thing that they all agree on is that they hate molesters.
That's what I understand.
So anyhow, all right, guys. Well, this has been great. Thank you again to Paul for being my awesome co-host on this. Great topic. Thank you all for the chats and the super chats. We don't have any announcements. I will say stay tuned tomorrow for TV Talk with me, Mark Pellegrino, and Jennifer Buoni at 2:00 PT Pacific time, 10 o'clock UK time, and that's 5 o'clock Eastern time, where we're going to be talking about the show Wednesday. So that have you seen that one, Paul?
I have not.
You should check it out, see what you think about it.
Okay.
But anyhow, thanks again, everybody. This has been the Ayn Rand Center UK Daily Objective, The Collective Special Edition, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, guys.